Known as Faux Rock for his ferocious hitting style, David Fulcher spent 8 years brightly in the spotlight of the NFL. We embrace them, cheer for them. They are heroes in our eyes. Yet when their time in the spotlight ends, many go on to do the most important work of their lives. They go into overtime. Welcome to Overtime, life after the spotlight with NFL All-Pro David Fulcher and his co-host, national award-winning speaker David Coleman, exclusively on the Bootleggers Music Group Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Overtime, life after the spotlight. I am your co-host, speaker David Coleman, here with my friend in his home office, NFL All-Pro David Fulcher. David, how are you today?
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Doing really, really well. Busy day of travel last couple days, but it's nice to be home, and it's good to see you.
I noticed something, man. What's that in the background back there?
That I often change my backgrounds for our shows, but as a national speaker, I have some really fun gigs. That is a few years ago. I'll be going back there August 17th of this year, but that is me speaking to 8,000 incoming freshman student leaders at Purdue University in Ross-Ade Stadium. And they were kind enough to give me a standing ovation, and somebody took that picture, and I'm very blessed to do what I do, as are we, to do this radio show.
You know, man, you might be going back there with national champions, Purdue Boilermaker basketball.
Something. It's very
that would be
possible.
Pretty cool.
The people I know well are very excited, and I think everyone knows that UConn is no joke, and it's probably going to be one of the best national championship games in a long time. Now, let's talk about our show today, because we're both before he hops on. When we first decided to do this podcast, Overtime, Life After the Spotlight, and we started talking about potential guests, David, the first name simultaneously out of our mouth was?
Dick LeBeau.
Dick LeBeau. Tell us about Dick before he comes on this show.
Well, let me tell you something, man. I believe that, God has a purpose, and he puts people in places to do things. And when I was being recruited my last year at Arizona State, one person flew out to Tempe to work me out, and that was Dick LeBeau. Wow. And I'm going to tell you something, man. I was a redshirt junior, so juniors were not coming out like they are today. And he came and worked me out, and I was a little bit out of shape. I hadn't worked out. I was afraid that I wasn't going to make it to the NFL, and he came and worked me out. And my 40 time was well below where it's supposed to be. My box was, everything that I did, my weightlifting wasn't there. And I remember him telling me that, well, I got to go back to Cincinnati and I got to report to Paul Brown. And when I report to Paul Brown, I'm going to tell him that, right. Coach, I think I found a safety, but he doesn't look like one. And I can remember that, man, as clear as it was yesterday. And this is probably, and I would say arguably, the best defensive-minded coach that ever coached this game.
David, let me ask you something to be fair. Okay, your 40 time wasn't where it was. Aren't you still, and weren't you then one of the largest? Weren't you 6'5", approximately 245, playing safety, correct?
Yeah, the NFL has never saw safeties that big. Most of them were linebackers, maybe a defensive end. But when I came into the league, I was 6'3.5", almost 6'4", and I was 230. Okay. And Super Bowl 23, I got on the scale. Don't like to tell people this much, but I got on the scale. I was 249 that morning before we played the 49ers in Super Bowl 23. So the NFL, I'm actually in college football Hall of Fame, yes, but NFL Hall of Fame because I am the biggest safety to ever play the game.
Isn't that something? So let me go right back to the question again. What should the 40 time be for the largest safety to ever play the game? I mean, nobody's expecting you to run a 4.2 or 4.5 or a 4.6, correct?
No, I think, the NFL and combines, they look for speed, mobility, everything that you can do. But I remember football is not a track meet. Football is about making plays. So when I played, I was about making plays. Was I ever going to catch Bo Jackson running down the sideline? No. But when Bo Jackson was between those tackles, David Fulcher was going to tackle him. So that's how I played the game. I didn't play the game for speed. I played it for consistency and making plays. And this guy, Dick LeBeau, knew what he had. He started something very special with David Fulcher and a defense that he calls all the time. And he'll probably talk about that when we get on the air.
I think what will become noticeable for anyone who watches or listens to today's show, and you and I were talking about this earlier today when we were just bantering and talking back and forth, but when you meet Dick LeBeau, when you meet him in person, which I've been blessed to do multiple times, and when you have him on a format like this, he is the calmest. It's just like you're talking to a friend who happens to have a brilliant defensive football mind. And you were saying to me, it's awfully unusual. We've watched him on the golf course. We've watched him stand in front of people chatting. Not exactly the personality type where you'd go, oh, that's going to be a great defensive football coach.
Yeah, LeBeau, Dave, it's funny, man, because, you're intense. Football is intense. Any sport is intense. Talking in front of a bunch of people is intense. But he's so calm. I want to call him Joe Cool, just relaxed. Does he get upset? Yeah, but his upset doesn't sound like he's really upset. So I can remember many a times, man, when I heard him get mad. You really didn't know by his voice that he was mad, but you could see it in his face that he was disappointed in what was going on. And like on the golf course, we play golf with him, and very seldom does he hit a bad shot. But when he hits a shot that he doesn't like, he kind of shrugs it off and says, "Hey, the next swing is going to be better." And I think that's how I play football, because that's what he taught me.
For people who follow the world of golf, and obviously this person's on the senior tour now, probably fairly close to retirement, but he's Freddie Couples smooth on the golf course. And the other thing I've noticed is when we played in these scrambles for charities, and we're going to talk to Coach about how big his heart is and how big your heart is, and when we play in these celebrity outings to make money for charities, his intensity, although quiet, he still is intense on that golf course. When we needed a 25-foot putt, who made it? Coach. When the first three of us had hit balls out of bounds and we had no shots left, who was the last person to step one up and hit it 280 down the middle? Coach. He still has that fire, even though it is calmly smooth. And that had to be fun to play for.
No, Dave, and I tell you, we play golf, and you saw how he is when he plays golf. He's a competitor. Yes. We all are. I mean, nobody wants to hit a bad shot. I don't want to miss a tackle. I don't want to drop an interception. I remember playing against the Jets in New York, and had a rough night sleeping. Got there to the game, got my game plan. I was lined up on the wrong side all the time. And then I would run to the other side, and they run the ball right when I was running across the field. I finished the game with like 16 tackles, but LeBeau gave me a D for assignment, but he gave me an A for effort. And he didn't smile about it, but he also didn't say, you know what, I'm going to bench you and put in the backup safety. You just make sure you're taking care of business. And fortunately for us, we won the game. But I didn't fare well. And he never once, put his hand up or chewed me out. He just said, whatever you did last night, don't do it again. And that was, I didn't sleep well. So the next time I had a away game and we stayed in a hotel, I went to bed early. I gave myself some sleep. Can't go to bed at 2:00 and expect to play a game at 1 and get enough rest. So this is the kind of guy that we've always visioned, you and I, when we start talking about putting this radio show together, that LeBeau would be that guy. And we thought about making him our first guy, but you know what? We've had some good guys before that, and we can't wait for him to get on.
Can't wait. And the other thing I've learned about Coach is he's extremely humble. And if you start to sing his praises, he will literally walk away. So before he joins the show, let me tell some things to our listeners, whether they're watching on a platform or listening, some things that you should know. For 59 consecutive seasons, 59, he was on the field level as a player or a coach in the NFL. 50, almost 6 decades, 14 seasons playing for the Detroit Lions, where he had 62 career interceptions, 4 touchdowns, and over 760 yards, return yards on those interceptions, but 59 straight seasons. And to this day, he is considered to be part of one of the best defensive secondaries, along with Dick Night Train Lane, Yale Larry, and Lem Barney, as one of the best. So you had one of the best ever helping you become one of the best ever?
You know what made me successful? I know I had to make plays, but what made me successful from the first year to the last year he coached me was he was always teaching. He was always teaching. You know, my 5th year in the league, I'm still asking questions. You know, I'm still wanting to be the best. And the only way I could be the best is to listen to what he says. And one of the stories, and hopefully we can talk about this, one of my games as a rookie, I played the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And normally in college, I would always go underneath the guard or jump over linemen and make that tackle. But this day, I went inside and he told me, if you ever do that again, son, I have a clipboard waiting for you. If you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to make both of those look good.
He probably never raised his voice to say it, did he? And I believe I see his son's name popping up, and I believe,
gentlemen,
are you there?
You got David Coleman.
David Fulcher and who?
David Coleman. All right, let me see here.
I don't know David. Oh yeah, I do know him. He's
There we go.
There we go.
All right.
There they are. What do you say, man? I can see you.
Can you hear me?
Brandon,
hear
we
you as
see
well.
you, we hear you. It's fabulous.
Perfect. Awesome.
Where's that young man?
He walked off on me as soon as this camera came on. Here he comes.
Thanks for helping us.
The real reason we're here.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you, man.
Brandon, we appreciate you very
Yeah,
much.
my pleasure, guys.
Hey,
what do you
there
think,
he
oh,
is.
partners?
What do you say there, partner? Good to see you,
What's
man.
up? Good
Hello,
to see you,
Don't he
Bengal
look
man.
good? Look how young he looks.
Hey, Full Rock. We
Yes,
got
sir.
challenged by Breeden and Barney.
Uh-oh.
So they said that we couldn't do that butt whipping we put on them again. So I told them when the weather gets just a little bit better,
Let's do it again, man. We'll do
hook
it
up.
again.
We'll hook up.
Is
Well, brother,
background all right for you guys? It's not.
Thank you for coming on, Coach. And I'm gonna let my double D, David Coleman, introduce you, man. And we thank you for coming on, brother.
Well, you guys made it easy for the old coach to know who I'm talking to. All I got to say is David.
There you go. There
We
you
sure
go.
appreciate you coming on, and we talked a little bit about you before you came on the program, and I was just sharing with our listeners, whether they're going to watch on a platform or listen, Coach, that for nearly 60 years, for 59 years, you were on field level. You were a player, one of the best for the Lions, and talked about the number of interceptions and touchdowns you had, and then 45 years as a coach. What was that like? Tell us what it was like to span 59 years, going from being a feared and beloved player to one of the best defensive minds the game has ever seen.
Well, actually, David, looking back at it, the time goes so fast you don't have time to reflect while you're doing it. You're just getting ready for the next process. Your annual calendar in the National Football League, there's always something on your plate. And the coaches and front office people get a little bit of time. I guess it's right about in June. And other than that, you're busy as you can be. And so looking back at it now, I kind of look for things to do to fill my time up, because you didn't have to worry about that while you were coaching or playing, as David can tell you. Your days are pretty well filled up. And even in the off season, if you're a player, you got to stay in shape, or there is no on season. And if you're a coach, you're looking for reasons that you weren't the world champion that year, or if you happen to get lucky enough to have been the world champion, how are you going to stay there? And that means scouting free agents and scouting college kids for the draft. And it's just a constant thing. And once you get them drafted, you bring them in and you start a spring training. And that's lesson planning and getting your installation schedules made. And it's a great occupation because you're always busy.
So, Coach, I want to go back in history, and I want you, if you can remember this. So, in 1986, there was this safety at Arizona State that obviously coming out of college as a junior, and they weren't taking juniors back then. And you came to Tempe to work me out, and I think you had a conversation with Paul Brown, if you can remember this. that I'm going to go to Arizona State. I'm going to look at a safety. Can you tell people a little bit about that conversation and that story?
Well, that was after I'd already looked at you, David, and I knew for sure what I was talking about. I love the story of David Fulcher. You were one of my favorite players to coach ever, and you were such an unusual package. I found that the closer to the ball I could put you, the more productive you were. You just had a great feeling uh, uh, for where the ball was going, what the play was going to be. And I put you right in the same automobile with Palomalu in terms of guys who just were instinctive and could feel the game. And the game of football, it's not necessarily rocket science. It's athletic ability and the ability to study what the opponent's been doing, because he's not going to change that much, and then get out in the game actually and execute and put what you have seen on that video in action on the field. So I was lucky in that I worked 16 years for the Steelers, but I worked 18 years for the Bengals.
Hmm.
And the Bengals were put together a little bit differently than a lot of teams in that era, not now. But the coaches did a lot of scouting for the team in the offseason, which I liked, because as the defensive coordinator, I got to look at the whole country of the top defensive players, and they pretty much had to listen to me some, because they really relied on their coaches to get a book of knowledge on these players that were coming up in the draft. It was an added work, certainly, but it was work that you knew was directly you were going to benefit from. So I really enjoyed that part of the way the Bengals ran their program in those days. And so I got out, both Davids, Arizona. And I always went and took a full day of film study if I didn't have film. They weren't as accessible as they are now today with all the video. All you got to do is plug in and you can get about any game you want. But in those days, you had to go and thread the projector and take a look at the guy. So you had some tremendously productive years earlier, but if I'm not mistaken, you'd been injured in that last year that you were playing there and had decided to make yourself eligible for the draft. And I'm looking at the film of you, and I see some good stuff that I liked. And I asked the coach whose office he had known me, his office, and was allowing me into the film pool. I said, I'd like to look at some of David's earlier years if I could. And he said, sure thing. So I went back and I looked at you as a sophomore, and you were tearing it up, man. And I could really equate in my mind for the type of things that I thought I might be able to ask you to do. And I could see where I thought you had a pretty good chance of being a pretty daggone good player.
Hmm.
So now you weren't hadn't been too active that last year that you played. How many games did you miss, David, that senior year?
I'm not sure. I think I missed like maybe two or three games that my
then,
junior, senior year. Yes.
And then that slowed you down in your preparation for these workouts. And I go to these workouts and I said to myself, oh, I hope he didn't run too fast. Because I've already seen what I was looking for. And you didn't. You had great balance and great athleticism, and your overall speed was questionable for a secondary guy in the NFL. And I said, oh, this is perfect. I said, because I'm going to write him up a little bit higher than a lot of people. So once you get done scouting the players and you go back, there's nothing else to do but prepare for the draft. And in the process of that, you meet, and then you have a meet about what time the next meeting is going to be, and you go over and over these players and everything. So that was where in the meeting, Paul Brown had sent me out with his last verbal instruction to me was, he said, Dick, I want you to find a safety for us. I said, we need a safety. I said, okay, coach. So in one of these meetings, he says, Dick, have you found this safety that I instructed you to? I said, yes, I got him, coach. I said, but let me tell you something right now so that you don't look at me sideways. When I bring him in here, or we brought you in to interview, so to speak. And I said, when I bring him in this front door, you're not going to think he's a safety because he's big and he looks like a linebacker. And sometimes he plays like a linebacker, but he's going to be a great safety, in my opinion. And his name is David Fulcher. And his brother was a quarterback. So, you know, he comes from a very intelligent football background family.
So
And so Paul he never did acknowledge too much of what any of his coaches were saying. And so he just said, so when you came in for that, after we drafted you and started getting on the field, and of course, by that time you were in pretty daggum good shape and moving like I had seen you move as an underclassman. And they said, well, he said, you're right, Dick. Said he doesn't look like a safety when he walks in, but he looks a little different on the field. And of course, the record shows what kind of a football player you were. And the thing that always impressed me about David Fulcher's productivity, he was a tremendous instinctive tackler and could get to the football. But he was also probably our best at playing the ball in the air, which surprised me even. But he had height and he had size, but it's like a good rebounder in basketball. He had instincts and he could get the daggone ball. And so we'd be in tight ball games, and I say to myself, now what do I want Fulcher to do here? Protect us on the pass or make sure they don't run the ball on us? So he presented a nice problem in that respect. But I'm pretty sure that's a story you were talking about, Dave. And that's at least 99.9% true. You know, it's been a couple of years ago, so I'm not exactly sure that was I quoted Coach Brown exactly, but
did great, Coach. Before you came on the air with us, we were. I know that you're a humble man from playing golf with you and just getting to know you. So we covered some of your accolades with 62 career interceptions, 4 touchdowns, a lot of return yards from your interceptions. Flipped it over to David with 32 interceptions during his career, 2 for touchdowns that he likes to remind everyone were against Cleveland and Pittsburgh. That means a lot to him. And Coach, you played when you were younger. You played for Woody Hayes for Ohio State, and you won a national championship. Correct?
yes, that's correct.
Did you take
The
anything with
50-70.
him as a
Pardon me?
player from playing with him? Playing for him? Excuse me. Did you take any of that onto the field with you when you were with the Lions, or as a coach? Did any of that college training transfer
Well,
with you?
I had the benefit, if you will, of having been exposed to many legendary coaches in my playing career. So I played 14 years in the National Football League, and you add on the 4 years at Ohio State, that's 18 years. And the 4 years that I had in high school was with an exceptional man and a great character building, really a pillar of the community. His name was Jim Bolus. And it's just a small town, London, Ohio, about 8,000 people at that time. It's completely mushroomed up to 10,000 now. But I had good coaching all the way through. Don Shula was one of my first defensive coordinators at Detroit.
Wow.
I was in several all-star games with Lombardi and the great Dallas coach that was their first coach, Landry. And those types of people, I got to watch them as they presented stuff in meetings and how they talked to people on the practice field. And I knew that I was going to be a coach. I assumed that it would be at the high school level, and I would have been perfectly content being that. And after playing until the age of 35 years old with no coaching background, I thought high school would be the only thing that was going to be available for me, actually. But I would have been fine with that in my life. But with that in mind, I really studied coaching and meeting, decorum and presentation. And I would make mental notes as I went along. I don't think that's the best way to do that. I don't think I would ever talk to a player like that, or I say, that was great the way he did that, And so I was building a background in coaching, even though I wasn't coaching. And I soon found out as a coach that the best thing to be was just be yourself. And fortunately, through the strength of my mother, I had a pretty easygoing, laid-back personality. And I did make myself one promise, David, as a coach, that I would try to treat my players the way that I wanted to be treated when I was a player. And all that experience. So when you ask me, did you take this guy or that guy? Not directly. I never said, oh, I want to be just like Woody Hayes, or I want to be like Don Shula or George Allen. All these guys I was exposed to, Vince Lombardi. The one thing that I did do, because I've always been a studier of people, I said that every one of these guys that went on to this extreme success as a coach, they had some personal trait about them, some magnetic aspect to their personalities. And I don't care what they would have chosen for their life's work, they'd have been successful because they had it.
So great.
And I thought, well, I hope I've got it, because I'm just going to be myself. And that's what I did.
You've been listening to Overtime with NFL All-Pro David Fulcher and co-host, award-winning speaker David Coleman on the Bootleggers Music Group Radio. Be sure to catch all our shows and music by downloading our app at bootleggersmusicgroup.com. All content is published and owned by the Bootleggers Music Group, LLC, and Zasco Publishing, and may not be duplicated without prior written consent. Executive producer, Paul E. Jones.